Hello, my name is Ixie, and this is my very first Björk analysis. When I thought about the first Björk song that I was going to analyze, I just knew it was going to be this one because I think this was the first Björk song I ever heard. I didn't realize that this song actually has two pretty different versions. There's the version that went along with the music video that was released with robots. And then there's another version which is on the album Homogenic, and that is the one that I grew up listening to. I thought it was an ambient song with vocals. Turns out it actually has a full production. When I first heard this song on Homogenic, it was really overwhelming for me. The beautiful message paired with this sort of structuralist, meandering, pulsating background, it almost reminded me of like a hymn for my soul. I'm not really a lyrics analyzer per se. I'm mostly going to be analyzing the harmonies, the melodies, and a little bit about the production and how that sort of supports the message, how that sort of supports the words. But more importantly, it's how the song feels to me, how it feels even without words. If you're not sure why I'm dressed like this, I like to be on brand. I bought this in Tokyo. It was made in China. Let's start with the original version, which is what accompanied the music video. So it starts with these beautiful strings, which give us the impression that we're in B flat minor. The strings are hitting some really tense notes. Almost sounds like kind of like tone clusters. That's really tragic sounding, I think, against the impression of a B flat underneath. Partly it's just because of this beautiful major ninth, I think. The second degree or the 9, it can just sound really, really sad against a minor background. There's a storm coming. Anyway, this part's just so cinematic. You know, the strings just kind of swelling. It doesn't actually give a very strong sense of a tonal center, so it's really emotional, and it kind of sets the stage. Like this is where like the curtain kind of goes up. The verse, I would say, is in D flat major, starting with an F minor chord, then going to the D flat major chord, and then going up to an unresolved G flat major chord. So that sounds like this. The reason I say it's in D flat major is because that is the chord where we feel the most at home. It feels really stable and settled there, like everything was trying to get there all along. And then there's the tension. No, tension, tension, that note is tense. So if this is in D flat major, then this F minor chord is the minor 3 chord. It's interesting to hear Björk using the 3 chord in this context because the 3 chord and the 1 chord are considered tonic chords and they don't have a huge difference between them. They share a lot of common tones, and that progression is considered not very strong. But it doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's not very strong. And you can hear it doesn't really create any sort of drama or any sort of big shift or any sort of real tension. That's very nice. It's this chord that I think creates the tension. But I think it creates enough tension, just a little, to make it sound like everything is locked into place when we finally get to the word love. And it is a minor chord, so it has already a little bit more of a complexity and fragility to it than the certainty of the major chord. So this is all very diatonic. Diatonic means that the chords and the notes are all adhering to a very specific scale, a major scale or a minor scale, and it's not borrowing anything from any other scale. There's no rogue notes, nothing that's coming in that doesn't naturally belong. So it's a very, very sweet, pretty chord progression, and it's maybe not the one that I would have immediately assumed that you would put underneath her melody. And let's look at why. So how I see it, Björk's vocal melody is essentially an arpeggiated, sort of out of order B flat minor 7 chord. In D flat major, the 6th degree of the scale is the B flat. The 6th degree tends to sound kind of lost and seeking, but not really sure where it wants to go next. Without that B flat, the chord that she's arpeggiating is a D flat major chord. You add the B flat in and it takes on this sort of unsettled sound. It's absolutely beautiful, but it does sound like it wants to go somewhere. That's partially why I think that this minor 3 chord has a little more oomph to it than usual, is because of the melody over it, which is creating tension in and of itself. Hearing this melody by itself, I might have assumed that it would be a plagal cadence, so going between 1 and 4, something like this. That sounds a lot more conventional. So I really admire this chord progression. It's not something I would have thought of, but I think it's really, really interesting. When you have more tension, it tends to make things sound a little bit more longing or more yearning or more incomplete or just more complicated, like humans. Her melody ends on the 3rd of the tonic chord. So she goes, I love this because the 3rd of a chord is very warm, very humanizing, can sound very tender. It's a hug. Whereas the minor 3rd can sound a little bit more cold, a little bit more calculated, a little more detached. So bringing this part of the chord out with her voice on the word love, I think is part of why arriving there feels so good. Even with a drum groove behind her in this song, Björk's vocal style is very improvisational sounding to me. It doesn't sound very structured. It sounds like she could sing it differently every time. Her timing is very exploratory, even though this has a grid, it's in 4/4, 4 beats per measure. She's staying within the phrases, but within the phrases, she's sort of meandering in a way that it would be very difficult to actually notate her vocal melody. So it's like not easy to follow, but that can kind of, that kind of relaxes me because there's nothing really to grab onto. So there's this feeling of just like letting go, like in an isolation tank and just floating. There is a synth that sounds a little bit like a harp or a harpsichord. And it's very shimmery, just kind of comes in. Similarly to her voice, it doesn't really seem like it's fitting into the grid. It just kind of comes in when it comes in. And the rhythm is dum, dum, da, 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 just kind of exploratory. It's sort of saying what it wants to say. It's not trying to fit into any box. I think a lot of the time it's kind of playing the notes in the D flat major 7 chord. With some other notes in between, but like that's sort of the main sound I'm hearing. I'm definitely hearing this major 7th. That raised 7th at the end there creates a lot of tension, but at the same time, this chord is naturally the 7th chord built off of the tonic. So it also kind of sounds placid and like it's kind of like right. It sounds right, but it also sounds a little bit like ... It doesn't sound as certain as like... Sweet, sweet tension. You have to trust it. This song doesn't have verse, chorus, verse, chorus. So this middle section is sort of an extension in a way of the verse, but the chord progression is just a little bit different. So instead of this, we just go back and forth between the F minor and the G flat major, the 3 and the major 4. And so without the tonic chord in there, this feels so stuck. Like we're taking a step forward, nothing's there. Take a step back, nothing's there. Nothing's really changing, right? And her melody's not really changing either. And this is building tension. This is building expectation that something's got to give. So we don't have any resolution. And each line, each main lyrical line starts with maybe. So listen to the uncertainty in this. So after all of this, it's really unsatisfying. Staring at, twist your head around. Sorry, that was really out of tune, but you get the idea. When she finally goes, twist your head around, we come around, right? It's so perfect. It's like in that moment, there it is. There's the love. It's all around you. It's like, you're right. I see it now. This chorus is really emotional for me. I think it's so perfect. If I just heard her melody by itself, I would assume that this would be the chord progression that she would choose. But it's interesting because in the ambient version that I know a lot better, the chord progression is sort of absent. And what's implied is a lot more tense and unfinished sounding. But this is absolutely beautiful. Going back and forth between my favorite chord, the flat 6 chord, and the tonic. This chorus is actually departing from the D flat major world into the B flat minor world. And B flat minor is the relative minor key to D flat major. So they're very much related. They have all the same notes and same chords. It's just that what we consider to be our tonic, our tonal center, where everything comes to finish and makes sense, is different, because where we come to a place of arrival in the song is a minor chord. Oh, God. So there are strings in this section, and they are going. Okay, I haven't gotten that completely right, but the main thing I'm hearing is this part. Oh my gosh. There's another really beautiful sample or production element I want to point out, and it sounds like a reverse clarinet. In middle school, all through college, I played the clarinet, so when I heard this sound, that's what it made me think of. I could be wrong, and it's playing a B flat minor chord, arpeggiated somewhat. What's really nice about this is that when we're on the B flat minor chord, it's basically just playing the same chord. But then when we go to the flat 6 chord, listen. Oh. That creates this G flat major 7 chord. There's a lot of like 7th chords created between all the different production elements and her voice. And I feel like that's a big part of what makes this song so yearning. So during this chorus, she is singing even higher. She's repeating this angelic mantra, all is full of love, all is full of love. And at first, we have sort of another overdub of Björk singing in a lower register, a different way, like a different part of her, almost like a disassociation. You could see like a music video version where there's an angel Björk singing, all is full of love, like really, really beautiful and full of wisdom. And then there's another Björk, and it's all like soft focus, and she's looking to the left, and she's just going, you ain't receiving, right? And so that Björk is kind of commenting on another thought process, right? This is the truth, all is full of love. This other part's like, you're just not listening. You're just not there. You're not watching. You're not accepting it. You're disconnected. And they're sort of overlapping, these two voices. In the higher angelic part, she's singing All Is Full of Love in the same general rhythm as the other lower version of All Is Full of Love, but this time she's just singing a different part of that chord, I believe. Now that B flat minor 7th chord she was singing on is now inverted. It's the same chord, it's just now starting in a different place. So things are arranged a little bit differently. Certain things are spaced differently than they were before. So after this voice is done singing, "Your doors are shut," it now joins the angelic mantra up top, singing "All Is Full of Love," except this voice has so much more conviction to it, has way more meat, more weight, and it seems to be saying the same thing but in a different way. All is full of love. It sounds like her head voice, and the other one is doing the Björk belt, which is so powerful. I feel like few vocalists belt like her. And in that belt is a C natural. Okay, why does this matter? First of all, just listen to what it adds. The note on the top that everything's sort of hitting is D flat, which is a half step away from the C. So there is a little bit of a feeling of a resolution up to the D flat from the C. And it's sort of I think in music theory terms, this is actually called a retardation, but just think of it more as a delay. You know, it's kind of like we're stuck on the same note and we resolve a bit later than we would expect. The chord changes before the resolution in the melody. So we have, right? So you feel that tension, and it's really, really beautiful. And part of it is because this is in B flat minor right now, and this C is the 2nd degree. And I mentioned that before. It's a very sad sounding note in certain contexts, and this is one of them. But also, I mean, not just sad is oversimplification, but without it, things sound a bit more palatable, a bit more dreamy. This note in and of itself in this context is adding so much. Just leaning on that, and that's what creates the most power. That's the moment in the song where everything reaches its fullest potential. The other thing I want to point out is that before, when she was singing All Is Full of Love, here, the love resolves on the tonic chord in the 3rd of the chord. Remember that warmth? Now, in this B flat minor world, the love still resolves on the tonic chord, but now it's minor. And the note that she's resolving to is no longer the 3rd of the chord, it's the root of the chord. And that has an inherent power to it. So listen to the difference. I just realized I think that's part of why that C natural, that 2nd degree, creates so much emotional tension for me, is because we finally get home It's so certain. Love. And then she's like, oh. It's sort of this like, it like takes my breath away because it takes away my sense of arrival so quickly in such a sad sounding way. But it's going up, right? It's resolving up. This chord progression feels a bit endless to me. You know, these two chords complement each other so well. Just feels like it could go on forever. And in fact, the song actually does fade out. Also, there is a love that is just continuing as the song starts to sort of get smaller and smaller, even before the fade out, as layers start to sort of drop off. You could just hear this like endless echo of love. Okay, now let's analyze the version that I'm most familiar with, which is the ambient version from the album Homogenic. The first question I always try to answer in an analysis is, what key is it in? This one is a little bit ambiguous because it doesn't have a really clearly defined chord structure of any kind or a drum beat. So there's a lot about this that feels very floaty. So at first I kind of hear the pulsing bass playing like an F, maybe an E or something like that. And then that kind of fades away. We get the same strings here that we had in the other song, or the other version, but these have so much more reverb and decay on them. So they kind of blend together. It feels even dreamier. And then it sort of sounds like the whole song is in D flat major. It's just sort of an implied like D flat underneath. And it's really hard to hear the pitch of the throbbing bass, though I actually think it might be G flat the whole time. But it didn't stop my brain from imagining that it was actually D flat. That takes on a really different sound than this. Right? Those chords create a narrative in and of themselves. Without that story, it's really the melody that's doing all of the storytelling in this version. Tension, tension, resolution. Strange note, resolves. Then we have this fourth, which sounds very holy in this context. In the other version, it's really different. In fact, the melody is just following the root of the chord. Whereas it's like... This version feels even more comforting to me because of that. But then the chorus is really interesting. There doesn't seem to be clear chords in this version. And the bass line doesn't really seem to be helping, which usually it would. It's just sort of being this sort of really low blub, blub, blub. And it's, like I said, its pitch isn't even clear. So my imagination kind of went wild, like imagining what is the tonal center here? You know, where am I? And what it decided was that it was on the G flat chord for the chorus and just stayed there. So if you remember, the G flat is the flat 6 in B flat minor. And that's what it sounded like to me, like we were on a permanent flat 6. Now, it's not that difficult for me to imagine that I would be absolutely in love with a song that just stayed on a flat 6 chord, implying where the tonic is, but never actually going there, because I love the flat 6 chord. It really meant something to me because it felt like there is no end. This really can't ever be over. There is nowhere to go. It's just here. It's all around us. You know, life is going to feel unfinished and tense until it's finally finished. And that love is like forever. This is such a different kind of video than some of the other analyses I've been doing. And when I was improvising, my favorite thing to do was to play 2 tone clusters for each implied chord. So this part, basically just play all these notes together, resolving up to the D flat. There's another cluster. So we have, and each cluster sort of implies a different chord. This one implies, what is it? I don't know. Okay, so that one implies the B flat minor chord. That would be a B flat minor 7 add 9 or add 2. I don't know. It's blasphemous for me to say, but sometimes I don't care about the name of the chord. In fact, when I was improvising on this song, I released that improv. Here's the link right here. I was in no way worrying about the names of chords. I wasn't even quite sure what I was playing. I just was feeling it. And that's honestly how I approach music. I feel it, and then I sit down and I dissect it when I really want to understand why I'm feeling this way, or what was working about this, or what is this beautiful thing that I've been playing. So the reason I loved that arrangement is because of the clusters and how tense that all sounds. So tense. I found that to be more in the spirit of her harmony than just like straight up minor and major chords. That didn't seem right. This is more. Now, just to give you an idea, I could resolve it up to the B flat, which is kind of what I always assumed was intended in the song, hearing it without a chord progression, but it didn't actually go there. But her melody makes it sound like that's what we're going to do. And also just that's the convention. Flat 6 chord with a melody like hers that kind of fits into both chords. You would think it would go to the tonic chord next. And it just really sounded like it just stayed in this place of tension. Okay, I think that's the end of my first Björk analysis. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see me analyze more Björk songs, please let me know. Bye. I'm gonna go for a walk in my kimono. All is full of love.